Hey, Michelle, good to talk to you again, and congratulations on the recent win at Tunnel Hill. You must be jazzed about that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm just over the moon.
Yeah, well, so are we, and be keen to talk us through the race. Why don't you kind of walk back, maybe even just the morning of and through the race, and then how you felt after the race, which I can only imagine.
Gosh, so you wake up the morning of, I definitely you have those nerves, you're so excited. And of course, the last week I definitely tapered quite a bit. And so you have all that kind of nervous energy. And in the past years, I guess they've started both races, the 100 and the 50 mile at 7 a.m. Okay. But this year, the 50 mile didn't start till 9. So I was like, oh my gosh, I just get an opportunity to kind of putz around and be nervous. But it was okay. I just stayed very calm. And so my routine before very long runs, the first thing I usually do is I get up and have a cup of coffee.
Right.
I just put coconut oil in my coffee. I actually put a pretty decent amount, especially since I knew hey, I'm going to be running for a very long time, so having that fat kind of first thing. And then it was about probably, about 8:15 or so, I brought my SFuels, the train. And so, train is something that I have, people ask me what do you use before your runs? What do you use before an easy run or a longer run? And it's the same, I always use the SFuels train because, what we want to do obviously is we want to keep our blood sugar stable. I don't want to get a blood sugar rise. Yeah. Because, and it's interesting, you get out there and you see people are eating bananas,
gels,
and bars, and it's really interesting. Even the evening before, we went to the pre-race talk because Michelle Hurn was speaking, and my goodness, the amount of pasta and guy in front of us. I watched him eat 4 desserts. I was impressed, but it was just my goodness, that's I couldn't sleep well if I was having that much sugar. But it's interesting, because this is a different way to approach nutrition. The low carb versus the very high carb.
Sure.
And so I had that was my pre-race. It was just coffee and coconut oil, and then one serving of the SFuels.
And then how far into the race before you started, whether it's hydration or just race plus, what typically for you, when do you start?
Yeah, so I usually start about 45 to 50 minutes in. And so, when we hit 5 miles, and I wanted to start out, that was one thing I was like, I do not want to go out too fast. I would rather start too slow.
Yeah.
That was, I kind of had this fear, what if I go out too fast? But when I started the race, there were 2 women that took off that were running pretty quickly. And then there was another woman that was running about my pace. So her and I actually ran together quite a bit, for quite a long time. And then when we hit the first aid station, my wife actually met me at every aid station. We would switch out the bottles. But I started I think it ended up being almost 50 minutes into the race that I took my first serving of the
race
the
SFuels
race.
Gotcha.
And I only had cherry flavor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So next time I might mix it up a little bit, but no, it was great.
6.5 hours of cherry, huh? You need another flavor. Fair enough.
There's 7 bottles of cherry flavor. But what's interesting is, and anybody who's done an ultra will be able to testify to this, is the first aid station, there wasn't very much stuff. We were 7 miles into the race, but by the time you got to mile 20, it was full buffet.
Yeah, I know.
And I realized there was another race. There was a much longer race going.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that benefited me was I didn't have to stop and take all the goos and gels and so much stuff.
Right.
From what I understand, one of the women who was in leading, I mean, she ended up dropping the pace, but when we passed her, she was kind of holding her stomach.
So
and that happens.
Related. Yeah, happens a ton.
Happens a
That's
lot with the higher carb.
So where did you end up? 7 hours for 50 miles.
Yeah, so 7:03:01 was my finishing time, and
is that a course record, by the way? Is that a women's record?
No, there were some women ran incredibly fast last year. She said a blistering time in the 6 hour. But it would have been, looking over the last 10 years, I think that would have had me in the top 3 or 4.
Wow. And it's your first 50 miler, right?
It's my first 50 miler. So I'm very excited.
Still frontiering and discovering. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel like I learned a few things.
Yeah,
I learned a few things about, one thing that's always been helpful for me that, Zach is my coach, he's told me is being very aware that when you get sore, the pain isn't going to increase exponent. It doesn't keep going. It does get to a point where it's I just have to survive this. Right. But I just love, and this is something that I would imagine most fat adapted athletes will tell you, is there's never a point in the race where I'm like, I'm going to run out of fuel. Like I'm going to hit the wall.
Right.
You know, there's a point when that muscle fatigue hurts and you're sore.
Yeah.
But I knew if I just stay like mentally tough, like I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Where, you know, you're watching even people in the, you know, in the 100 that are just, they're walking, they're cramping, they're holding their legs.
Right.
And obviously, like, this is my second ultra. Anything can happen. There's no guarantee. Racing is like life, right? There's no guarantee.
No,
you do
that's
everything
right.
Have a rough day.
So how many aid stations were there? Was it every 5 or 10, or what was the?
Yeah, it was a little kind of out and back. I want to say there was at least, I think there was eight on the 50, and then there would have been twice, maybe even a bit more. Because there was some that like spectators couldn't get to.
Yeah.
You had 3 that you could drop bags for, and then you saw, you know, you'd hit them twice because you're going out and then back. But yeah, I was able to just, like I said, switch out my bottles. My wife met me with, I had little, you know, I took in some, I had the SFuels, and then I had some whole food, and that was a little bit of rice. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I told you about this. I think it's on the way to you, by the way. So I know that race wasn't a night race, but for your next night race, we'll make sure that we have this over to you to get you through the night races. Are you looking at any other races coming up at the end of this year, or 50 milers, 100 milers? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, when you finish a race, I just remember thinking like, I need a minute. Like, I don't want to think about running for a while. And then, you know, the next day or two, when the soreness starts to dissipate, then you start dreaming again. You're like, can I run that faster? What's next, right? So yes, to answer your question, I would really like to see, if it's possible, the 50-mile race out in Las Vegas, the Jackpot Ultra Series. They have several different races at the end of February. I don't know if that's a bit ambitious. That's coming up fast. But yeah, we'll see what Coach says. I've sent an email. So
he had a great race too, right? I mean, he had a great race, and just awesome to see him back racing. He's got over his ankle problem, so. We were super proud with Zach's results. So it's great to see him strengthening back up too. So. Oh my gosh.
I when I sent him a message, I said, I felt like I learned more about Zach that day than I have. And him and I have been in communication for, almost 2 years.
Right.
The amount of grit and guts that I saw, like, I honestly was like, I'm still pretty impressed. Like it's pretty impressive. Like he went for it, you know, he put it all on the line, and that's hard to do. And then, you know, obviously he wanted to set the record. He fell back. And I mean, he fell back and he came in second, like, oh my goodness. Right. But for him, you know, obviously he was disappointed, but just seeing like that drive and that will, and that just like, even when it doesn't go right, like, I'm going to push and I'm going to finish. Like, it was incredible.
Well, and off the back of an injury, right? So, I mean, he just stepped right back into it. So, yeah, I mean,
the fact that he's healthy too, like, I have no doubt. Like, I sent him a message. I was like, you're going to be fine. I have no doubt you're going to get this at some point. So, but just being healthy, I'm sure he would tell you the same thing, is a blessing just to be back training.
Oh, for sure. Well, hey, I just want to give you a big shout out and congrats from the SFuels team. We're super proud of you and jazzed about your win, and more power to you. I'm sure there's some other races coming up that we'll see you top of the podium again. So all the best.
Thank you. I sure hope so.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk soon, Michelle. Thanks again for catching up.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Bye.